Wonderful. Alrighty, so good afternoon, everybody. Whilst we have people filtering in, just wanting to welcome you to the AgriFutures Chicken Meat Program webinar series. We will have a poll that pops up on your screen. So just whilst we're waiting for a few more people to join, feel free to start answering the 3 questions that are there, just some useful information for us to understand who's here in the room. Radio. So I can't, being in webinar mode, I can't see everybody that's here in the room, but I can see the participant number slowly increasing. So welcome all that are joining. As you're joining, you will see an introductory quiz, which has got three poll questions there. So we greatly appreciate a quick response to those. And since we're a few minutes in, I will dive into starting the webinar. So good afternoon and welcome to the AgriFutures Chicken Meat Program webinar series. I'd first like to start with an acknowledgement to country. AgriFutures Australia acknowledges the First Nations people of Australia as the traditional custodians of the lands and waters on which we live, learn and work. We pay our respects to past, present and future elders of these nations and any First Nations people on this webinar today. In particular, I'd like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people of Australia, the traditional custodians of the lands and waters where I am hosting this webinar from today, which is a sunny and slightly windy Canberra. Just a little bit of housekeeping to start us off. We will be recording today's session and we'll be making that available through online channels. As I run through these housekeeping items, for anybody that has joined us, has recently joined, there will be an introductory poll that's sitting up there on your screen. And we use that to gauge just who's in our virtual here in our virtual room. As this is a webinar, your video and audio functionality are not enabled so that you can best utilize the Zoom screen real estate to view the shared content. And it also allows us to minimize background noise and distractions to our invited guests. When content is shared, there are features on your screen that you can adjust to view the shared content as well as the speaker windows in the format that works best for you. If you have any queries about these, feel free to pop them into the Q&A function and our tech support team can assist with these. We will have time for questions and answers at the conclusion of this, at the conclusion of the webinar content. So in the meantime, there is a dedicated Q&A chat function for everybody to ask and pop in any questions over the course of the webinar. Now, it is located across the bottom of your screens and it's close by to the chat function, but not to be confused with the chat. So please use the Q&A function rather than the chat, as this is what we'll be monitoring. So for those of you who have joined the webinar series before, hopefully you are familiar with who I am, but for anybody that is new, my name is Sarika Pandya. I'm the research manager, part of the broader AgriFutures Levied and Emerging Industries team. And I specifically look after the Chicken Meat Research Development and Extension program, hereafter referred to as RD&E. So in our RD&E plan, one of the key research priorities within the program focuses on improving environmental sustainability outcomes, and the program invests in research and projects via industry levies within this area to improve knowledge on the most significant components of the chicken meat industry's environmental impacts. So this webinar is a third in the series in which we host expert presenters to provide you with the latest information on topics that are relevant to industry and our research priorities. So today's webinar is all about the Chicken Meat Sustainability Framework. Following the successful launch of the industry's inaugural framework last month, this webinar is designed to share snippets from the launch and update the industry and interested stakeholders about the framework itself. Now, today's webinar is a little bit different to the first two that we've held in that it won't feature a series of presentations. Instead, we're going to move between videos and question and answer sessions. Our first video features some of the speeches from the day of the launch, and that'll be followed by a fireside chat with industry representatives Mary Wu and Brian Astridge, which will take us into our second video, which provides more detail about the framework and its themes, and then we'll finally close out with the open Q&A session where we answer any questions asked by our audience. So with that, I hope you enjoy today's content and find it interesting and informative in a different way. And with that, let's dive into the first video for today.
Sarika, I'm so sorry to jump on and sorry to our listeners right now. We're having an issue with Zoom. It seems that it's actually not just us. Sarika, would you be able to jump on and please jump straight into the fireside chat while we manage this in the background? Sincere apologies.
Not a problem at all, team. So the first video, we will come back to playing that first video to you all. Thank you. Thank you very much whilst we sort of slightly change up our program for today. So we'll dive into learning a little bit more about the framework from two people who've been closely involved throughout its development. I would like to welcome our two industry representatives, Dr. Mary Wu and Brian Astridge. So Mary Wu is the Chief Executive Officer of the Australian Chicken Meat Federation. She's a registered veterinarian with significant protein industry experience and previously been in senior roles within the red meat industry. Mary's worked across trade and market access programs, government regulatory and compliance programs, working with RD&E service providers, and prior to that has had a long career with the Commonwealth Department of Agriculture, and now we brought her over to chicken meat. Our second speaker, Brian Astridge, is the General Manager for Risk Assurance and Sustainability at Trio Seafoods and is a member of the AgriFutures Chicken Meat Advisory Panel. And he's been involved heavily in poultry industry initiatives, including being the representative for the New Zealand Food Research Science Centre, as well as operations manager for the Food Innovation Centre in New Zealand. And Brian has significant international experience on issues relating to trade and food and animal products and a wealth of knowledge in the sustainability space. So this fireside chat is about the sustainability framework and will feature a series of questions to Brian and Mary to share a little bit more about the framework. So to start off with our first question for you, Brian, if anybody in our webinar audience today or viewers of the recorded webinar were to share 3 key takeaways about the framework either with their colleagues, families, or members of the general public that don't work in agriculture, let alone the poultry industry, what would they be?
Yeah, thanks, Sarika, and good afternoon, everyone. Look, I think it's really about the long-term sustainability of this industry. This industry is here to stay for generations to come. It is a $4 billion production value industry with an $8 billion retail value. So, look, we are very significant, and with that size, we're employing over 58,000 people in rural and regional communities far and wide. So, and I think the key to this is we're doing it in a truly sustainable way. If you look at the carbon footprint, we are the lowest carbon footprint of all land-based mainstream meats. So it's an industry here to stay, and it's done in a very sustainable way. So I think and we're employing your family and friends. So that's the key messaging, Sarika.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much, Brian. And as a follow-up question to that, or similarly, Mary, what would be 3 sustainability misconceptions about the Australian chicken meat industry that you'd like to myth bust with our audience? And again, for them to share with anybody else that they might be conversing with.
Sure. So thanks very much, Sarika, and good afternoon, everybody. I think probably even before I talk about misconceptions, maybe some positive assumptions that we can also affirm, because I think, consumers generally, for example, know that, in their heart that chicken meat is a low impact protein, and that there are, that it is readily available, it is reliable, it is an affordable form of protein. So this sustainability framework goes a long way to actually cementing that and giving people the evidence base to be able to make those claims. So in terms of the actual sort of myth busting kind of key points, for me, they sort of are in three different areas. So one is about that people assume that chicken meat are produced using hormones and antibiotics as growth promotants for growth promotion purposes. But for me, you know, that is a myth that's, I don't know, it's been in the general psyche for a very long time, and it is quite a difficult thing to shift. But this sustainability framework, again, clearly provides that the structure and that the narrative behind that we don't actually use hormones and antibiotics for growth promotion purposes in Australia. In fact, it's illegal to use those chemicals in our products. And we have not used it for many decades. I think Australia's in a very unique position in that our production systems are different from those of overseas, where sometimes, you know, hormones and antibiotics are used. So in our case, we do not use it for growth promotion purposes. The second point for me is about, you know, that people think that chicken somehow are factory farmed with poor animal welfare outcomes. Again, in that, I think it's a very general brush to try and paint the industry with, and again, it's an incorrect brush because chickens, despite being intensive production systems, we are world leaders when it comes to animal welfare. So, for example, you know, the sustainability framework really clearly positions us and all the animal welfare credentials from the looking at it from not just domestic, but how do we rank internationally? So, as an example, we are one of the only industries in the world that are voluntarily accredited to what we call gold standard, or a standard that is way above what the legislation requires. And Australia is unique in that, you know, we're voluntarily accredited to standards like RSPCA or FREPA standards that cover already more than 92% of the industry. As an example, we've got the RSPCA approved standards cover over 400 actual requirements that our chickens are produced under, and these are strictly assessed very regularly. And probably the third one that I really wanted to talk about is just around the conception that if you work in the industry, you're limited to farming. You know, Brian mentioned that we employ over 58,000 people and provide jobs for that many families. The industry is all about focusing on workforce diversity. We've recently published through AgriFutures a workforce strategy that looks at how we attract, retain, and train a really sustainable workforce. Because, as Brian has said, this is an industry that's going places. We are growing, and that we are going to be attracting more people to come and work for us. And it's not limited to farming. It is, you know, there's so many of us in so many different roles across the whole spectrum of the supply chain. I think that there's way too many to be able to talk through on this webinar. But if anyone's interested, jump online and have a look at the AgriFutures ACMF workforce strategy about, you know, all the different roles that we are trying to cultivate within the sector. So.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that, Mary. And I think when we do get to sharing videos later, and for those that might be familiar with sustainability frameworks, it's more than just the environment, as you touched upon. Like, we're looking at environment, we're looking at the overall sort of health, welfare of the birds. We're looking at that, at the financial and economic viability of the industry, as well as its workforce and people. So, question to both of you, moving away from I guess some of the fact sharing and some of that myth busting. The framework, which our audience will come to see when we do get these videos working, is that this is the first poultry sector sustainability framework that includes metrics and targets. So my question to you guys is, are there any targets in your opinion that will challenge, push, or stretch the industry towards achieving its sustainability goals? And what are a couple of examples of these?
Okay, thanks, Sarika. So I think what Mary's alluded to is it's really exciting, because I think the this framework is an opportunity for us to shout from the parapets on how good the industry is on a number of our routine metrics, animal welfare and food safety. So we do a lot of really good stuff. So this is a real opportunity to tell a really good story. Yet, as in anything, there's always opportunity for improvement. And I think a couple of areas where I think we can move the dial a bit is in packaging, recyclability, and waste to landfill. Now, this is not just a poultry industry challenge. I think this is a whole of... Sorry, what's happening? Can you hear me, Sarika?
Yes, I can. You're good to keep going, Brian.
Good. Okay, so I think this is the whole of industry challenge in terms of all of the FMG, the whole infrastructure. We need governments, shires, and industry to work together to provide solutions for large-scale packaging, recycling, and waste to landfill, especially at that industrial level around soft plastics. So I think it's going to be really key too that we bring in the research community to help and look at how can we do this on a large scale.
And I might pass over to you, Mary, if there's anything that you'd like to allude to here.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sarika. I think for us, just as a sector, but also looking across other sectors, that the big challenge in agriculture is always going to be around aiming for net zero by 2050. I think, chicken meat industry, we are already a very small contributor to the total agricultural emissions landscape. But as we've said before, it is a growing industry, and we are responding to consumer demand to increase, in terms of our total production on an annual basis. How we're positioned for that to meet those kind of challenges. For example, I think, you look at the renewable investments that are already underway. There's some really positive news even in the last couple of weeks. For example, I think there's a big company called AgriFutures that's building the biggest off-grid chicken farm in Australia. So we're talking about 4 megawatt solar farms, 4 megawatts of battery storage altogether to support 40 sheds that's going to be completely off-grid. So we are seeing these massive investments. We're also seeing things like investments in biodigesters and waste to energy kind of incineration processes. There's lots of industry investments out there that are helping with that net zero transition. And I think it's very exciting to be part of the industry that plays into that. And probably another way to look at this question is whether there are also external factors that may challenge the industry in how we achieve our sustainability goals. I think, front of mind, one key risk for everyone would be around highly pathogenic avian influenza. We've obviously just all seen that the devastation that H5N1 has wreaked across other poultry production countries internationally. And we, of course, ourselves have just responded to the largest H7 incident in Australian history. So the global threat of HPAI, it will continue to push us towards even greater levels of biosecurity preparedness, response planning, and investments in that way to ensure that we can continue to deliver on our food security commitments, that we underpin a reliable and secure supply of food to all Australians, particularly when at a per capita consumption level, we're at 50 kilograms. And on an annual basis, we produce 1.5 billion kilograms of chicken meat. And again, that's growing. So thanks, Rika.
Thanks, Mary. And I might actually stay with you because the next question sort of flows on nicely from considering the metrics and the targets that are in the framework. What pathways does this framework set for future performance monitoring, measuring, and reporting against the sustainability priorities that are recorded within it? Because I think it's great to have a framework, but then to understand how we're actually achieving that and how we're continually improving as an industry is probably equally important.
Yeah, thanks, Sarika. And I think that's critical in that to be able to measure anything, you need to be able to, to be able to track and trend anything, you need to be able to measure in the first place. That was one of the key things that we thought about as a sector and a steering group when we were developing all of this work, and how we and setting up a really strong governance process behind it so that we can have that longevity and continuity going through into future years. So this structure has set us up for biannual reporting. So, we'll be looking at having that done within that 3-year cycle of the framework. And I think we're fairly, again, unique as an industry and ambitious as an industry to say that we're going to be looking at updating the framework every 3 years. But that's because, as you'd be aware, that the sustainability space moves so quickly. So we need to ensure that we as an industry continue to evolve and grow and adapt our sustainability journey as the world around us sort of shifts in that way. As an example, we've just seen the legislation pass in both upper and lower house around the climate-related disclosure requirements when it comes to emissions. We've alluded to that within our sustainability framework, that there would be, regulations that would change how we undertake reporting. So, that now that this has come through, it'll obviously impact on how the future versions of the framework will need to be adjusted in order to meet those regulatory requirements. So yeah, it's a constantly moving journey. But I think having those strong governance processes and having a strong committee underneath it, and that commitment around regular reporting, will then set us up in a really good place for the future.
And whilst we've only just launched the framework, like I know the industry will continuously, but we're working together to meet the targets and the metrics that are there in that framework, and for everybody to, I guess, stay tuned in due course when we've got updates and items to share on the framework. The final question in this fireside chat is for both you, Mary and Brian, because you might be able to offer different perspectives from sort of a whole of industry or industry peak body where you're interacting with government as well, and for you, Brian, being part of industry, but as well as the Chicken Meat Advisory Panel. How does the collaborative effort of the framework or developing the framework emphasize the importance of partnership and having shared visions when driving positive change within the industry? I guess and beyond as well.
I think I'll go first, and then Mary can have the last word. I think for me, this is really around the transparency and publication of this document really focuses the mind of everyone. And for me, I guess being on the chicken meat research panel in industry and previously worked with government, I think with those 3 stakeholders, we need absolutely laser beam focus on what we need to do. So it helps the researchers out there on this call go, where does industry and the community need the research? For government, it's around what support and removal of barriers does the government need to do for us to be successful? And for the community and industry, we need to enact this and execute this. So it's just that laser focus for me that's the most important.
And from your perspective, Mary?
Yeah, look, I totally agree with Brian in that it is about having that common line in the sand and then showcasing not just the achievements of the industry, but it's about how far we've come and where are we going. It's about our future journey. So to Brian's point, it's about aligning and providing that unified direction and message that everyone can see where we're headed, and can contribute to our as we go. And it's about having the stakeholders being coming along with us on that journey. So collaboration, for me, it's multifaceted and multi-layered. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Every person on this call will be looking at it from a slightly different angle, whether you're a researcher or whether you're part of the government, or whether you're part of the industry. So everyone has different set of roles to be able to contribute. But as we develop this framework and as we start reporting and against the metrics and the targets, and as we continue to evolve this framework, I think it's critical for all those sectors and the different groups to have that ongoing buy-in and support for the framework to make it a success.
Fantastic. Thank you both. Thank you to both of you for sharing your thoughts in response to those questions. And I really hope that our viewers either learned something new about the framework or about the industry, or heard a fact that they've gone, oh, this is a bit of a gem. I can share this. I can share this with others to educate about the industry. Now, I've been trying to give my full attention to the screen whilst working with our tech support team to see if we have managed to resolve any issues. We've had plans A, B, C, and we might need to go to D on the spot.
I'm so sorry, Sarika, and I'm sorry to everyone just here as your tech support, but unfortunately, Zoom has decided to not play ball despite the multiple times we have prepared these videos to share with everyone. Unfortunately, Zoom is not allowing us to share with Send from any of our panelists, and we think that that might be a Zoom issue in the back end, and we cannot resolve it, and we're so sorry. These are beautiful videos, but Sarika, we'll just hand over to you to wrap up. There's some questions in the Q&A, so they would be great to wrap up, and what we'll do is at the end of the session, we'll send out communications, which will have the videos, which we recommend everyone watches because they're beautiful. But I'll hand over back to you, Sarika, to wrap up with Mary and Brian and answer those questions. And we also have a wrap-up poll. Thank you.
Thanks very much, team. I think what I might do before I jump into some of the questions that I can see there in the chat and go through the wrap-up, just as a quick high-level touch over the themes that are in the framework. I'll cover some of that content that would have been in one of the videos, which we will share with you afterwards. So for anybody that's not come across or seen the framework yet, the framework has 4 key themes. So they are chickens, planet, people, and food security and economic resilience. So that theme of chickens demonstrates the industry's commitment to implementing industry best practice approaches to animal welfare, and it covers looks at areas like genetic, nutrition, transport, physical environment, and health and behaviour. The second theme, planet, it shows the industry's commitment to minimising its impact on the natural environment, with the aim of reducing greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050, being continually adaptable and resilient in the face of climate change, and implementing existing and new industry stewardship programs. That people theme, which we heard some of our facts related to earlier, it reflects our commitment to fostering a healthy, diverse and a safe space for industry workers, and with the aim of promoting growth and retention within the workforce, while that surrounding community maintains confidence and support for businesses within the chicken meat industry. And then finally, that food security and economic resilience theme, it supports the continual growth and financial resilience of the industry to provide the Australian community with reliable, nutritious, safe and quality food. So there's a lot more detail about these themes in the framework itself. We will definitely provide you with links to the videos that we were hoping to share. So with that, what I'll do is I'm going to jump into some of the questions that have been asked in the Q&A chat. So, and this is open to both of our panelists. So starting with the first question, while it's positive to have a 2050 net zero target, why doesn't the industry have a 2030 greenhouse gas emissions target?
Maybe I can just kick off and then Brian can add on to it. Hey, Rick, lovely to see you on this. Look, for us, I think the industry is very cognizant of that broader 2050 government mandated target. This framework is intended to provide alignment to that. So it doesn't preclude companies from developing their own sort of stretch targets that are more company specific. So as an industry, the broad base is there, but it really depends on how companies are evolved on their own sustainability journey as to whether or not they could provide a 2030 GHG target.
And I think, Mary, this doesn't preclude us from not setting a target at the next iteration as well. I think we've got a lot of metrics in this one as well, and I think this is going to be really key in understanding what the baseline metrics look like to be able to maybe set interim targets in future publications. But as you said, each company is absolutely working on stretch targets.
And moving on to our second question, will the chicken meat industry compare its sustainability credentials to other agricultural industries? And if this is the case, are we using standard indices or standard metrics across to compare it across different sectors?
Yeah, again, I'll give it a go. So, look, for us, we are probably actually one of the last sectors in the Australian ag space to actually put together our sustainability framework, even though, you know, we are one of the most sustainable. But I think we have learnt a lot of lessons in this process from other sectors that have gone before us. You know, the sectors like dairy, pork, beef, sheep. There's lots of sectors with existing frameworks. In developing the evidence base for this sustainability framework, we through AgriFutures undertook, you know, significant research, particularly around life cycle assessments, so that we could actually quantify, you know, all of the metrics that we've put into this framework. Particularly around, you know, things like water usage, GHG emissions, land use, you know, all those kind of different areas. So energy use, fossil fuel, all those kind of points. So I think that the measurements across will be fairly similar. So we have, you know, in terms of the way that metrics are expressed, they are very consistent with how other sectors have reported them. We probably don't have, you know, the hundreds of metrics that some other sectors are measuring, but we didn't feel that we needed to go down that road. So our metrics and targets are really critical and specific to the chicken meat sector. That you know really showcases what we're doing as a sector.
Look, and I think to add to that, I think healthy competition is great. If we can all move the dial, it's great for all of us. So absolutely, we will be looking at other sectors, and some of us work with other sectors as well. So look, and I think it's really key that a lot of the research is across different sectors. So we will take all good ideas and transfer them to the chicken meat sector if we can.
Wonderful, and I'll move to the next question, also from the same audience member. Is sustainability being driven by markets or supply chain, or by the industry itself?
I wonder if I start this one, Mary, just
Sure.
to give an industry perspective. This is absolutely push and pull. Absolutely, our supply chains and our partners are telling us to get better and asking us what great stories we have, and wanting to give consumer-facing success stories and targets. At the same stage, though, they're also looking at us to provide solutions. So we're very much pushing solutions towards them. So this is a partnership. It's neither all them nor us. It's actually a real true partnership, and we are regularly meeting with our customers and supply chains and trying to figure this out together, because we don't all have the answers on our own.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I think you know, when you look at some positive examples, you know, for internal industry-driven sustainability improvements, I previously always used the example of our feed efficiency and you know how we're able to convert a kilogram of how we are able to grow a kilogram of meat. I think sustainability practices have always been embedded as part of our business around how we can improve efficiencies through our system. So feed efficiency, it used to take 2.5 kilograms of feed to grow a kilogram of meat. Now it's around 1.5. So on an annual basis, we're saving, you know, upwards of 1 billion kilograms of feed in order to continue to drive our sustainability practices. So I'm really I think to Brian's point about, push and pull, we've got some really good stories that we can put forward and stories that need to be told, that consumers can see that as an industry, we are looking at the future and that we are looking at more sustainable ways of production, and how do we continuously drive innovation and improvements.
Fantastic. I'm going to say the video is not working is a bit of a blessing because we've had some really good questions come through, and I don't need to draw a line on questions and say we don't have time for any. So I'm going to keep working through the rest of the list. And this next question, I might throw this on to you first, Mary, because you did reference the workforce strategy earlier. So the question is, what ways would the sustainability framework support the workforce strategy and even vice versa?
Oh, I think the sustainability framework really showcases that workforce is a critical pillar of our industry, and that, to have a sustainable, productive industry, we need to have a really strong cohort of people that work for it. And the other flip side of that is that the industry supports 58,000 families, that every day someone's got a job that they can go to, that they're happy in, that they're, incredibly safe in working for the industry, all those sort of considerations. And I think the workforce strategy is a bigger part in the longer term. How do we attract, retain, and train people? So it's a lot more granular, it's a lot more detailed, it's a roadmap of short, medium, and long-term actions. So that they are slightly separate in that the framework, the sustainability framework, provides the overarching narrative of the picture, but for that more granular level, you need to go to that workforce plan.
I think from that, and I guess having the benefit of being involved in the development for both, where there are synergies, we will definitely jump on those opportunities when they present themselves. Our next question that we've got in the chat, I'll head over or send over your way first, Brian, and it's about deforestation-free soybean meal. So the question specifically is, when will the industry commit to 100% net deforestation-free soybean meal?
Yeah, look, so you'll see the framework is absolutely going to measure the percentage of net deforestation-free soybean meal. Look, there's a lot of discussions within and outside the poultry industry as how you verify deforestation. So I think there's some yet unanswered questions that aren't just related to the poultry industry around verification thereof. So I think there's got to be some further work in that area before we set a black and white goal around what that looks like. But absolutely, that's top of our radar to get some clarity on verification of that.
And I'll probably just add that, in terms of the global picture, it is a hugely evolving space. We are seeing, legislation from the EU around EU deforestation regulations. We are seeing supply chains react to that. For example, greater certification processes coming out of countries like Brazil, that potentially would change the dynamics of soy flow around the world. So to Brian's point, I think that there are still some significant unknowns in that area that will continue to be worked through over the next couple of years. But as we've said, that there is a deforestation-free metric as part of the framework, so that we can start baselining that and understanding how that changes over the years.
Wonderful. This is like such a great opportunity for you guys to share your insights, and for the audience to hear the different sets of views to these questions. And with that, I'm going to move to the final question, throw that to both of you. And is there a need for greater cooperation, both up and down and across the chicken meat supply chain, so I guess in every direction, in order to implement the framework?
I'll let you have the last word, Mary, so I'll start on this one. So look, I think today's conversation is part of this, is we need more we need more and better research in this area to help us solve the problem. We need everyone focused, and I think the launch of this framework is a great start to this. But absolutely, we can always do more, and I'm keen to be part of it.
Yeah, thanks very much. So from my perspective, the answer to, is there a need for greater cooperation? Absolutely. That's what it's all about. We can't do this in isolation, and we must have the buy-in from and ongoing buy-in from everyone in the supply chain. Because when we're talking about implementation of the framework, when we're actually measuring and reporting against it, it is critical that the supply chain, provides us with the right data to inform the actual reporting process. So there are, and it's an ongoing, I keep saying it's an ongoing journey that we go on with sustainability, and it's ongoing partnerships and cooperation and increased investments and innovation, so that it's not a static point. It is that ongoing cooperation. Thanks.
And I might just throw in a last gem. Unfortunately, that wasn't the final word, because I've just picked up on one question that's in our chat function and not in the Q&A. And given that we've got the time, I'll put that to both of you to answer. And this is a question about about welfare. There's some global pressure to move towards slower growing chickens for welfare reasons. How does this sit within the framework, and more broadly, how does the framework manage potential trade-offs between pillars?
I might just start, and maybe Brian can add to it. This is a really interesting question, because we have, particularly with Europe, we have seen this increased quantification of what does slower growing chicken actually mean. So on one hand, there is a perceived welfare benefit of slower growing chickens. However, there is significant trade-offs, as the questions picked up, around sustainability. I think, Europe has just gone and done an independent study to show that, I think I'm just quoting, you'll be able to find the details of the studies, but it's around a 30% to 40% sustainability offset, essentially, that in terms of increased feed, increased land that you're going to need, increased number of sheds, increased labour, increased energy costs, and transport, simply for switching through to the slower growing chickens. So essentially, it undoes every sustainability improvement through genetics that has been selected over the last 30, 40 years for the trade-off with a slower growing welfare claim. So again, it is up to individual countries, and their consumers to assess whether that's feasible for their markets. That the Europeans certainly have looked at it, and it even quantifies a potential increase in costs for the general consumer. And so again, it is a balance that consumers and the industry have to tread fairly carefully. So.
And Brian, you can unplan, but you can have the last word.
Just a simple statement. I guess the consumer will eventually get what the consumer wants at the price they're prepared to pay. So I think for me, it's around just educating the consumer on what the various options are. And if you pull one lever, the other lever might move as well. So really, it's around educating the consumer. But at the end of the day, the market will supply what the consumer wants.
Fantastic. And with that brings us to the end of all of the questions that I have seen come through the chat and the Q&A. And I might just move us into our wrap up. So to start off with, in closing, I'm just going to bring everybody's attention to an exit poll, which will be similar to that introductory poll that'll pop up on your screen sort of anytime soonish, provided that there aren't any tech issues preventing that from being shared. We greatly appreciate your time in providing any feedback that you can, just so that we can make improvements to upcoming webinars part of the series. I'd like to thank I'd like to thank, but first of all, I'll start with our industry panelists for today. We really appreciate your time and generosity in sharing your knowledge, as well as that you've developed over your active involvement in developing the framework and more broadly just in the industry. And I think a big thank you to our audience who I've seen the participant numbers has remained quite steady over the course of this webinar, and that's in the absence of the 2 videos that we were hoping to share. So thank you very much for taking the time to register and join and stay part of this webinar that hasn't 100% gone to plan, but hopefully was still very informative. As mentioned at the start of the webinar, it has been recorded. It will be made available online, and we will share links to any resources mentioned. So namely, that will be the sustainability framework where it sits on the AgriFutures website, as well as the Australian Chicken Meat Federation website. And just a final reminder, whilst this isn't a biosecurity or health and welfare webinar specifically, please remember to report anything unusual or concerns about potential emergency animal diseases to the EAD hotline to make sure the industry remains very biosecure. With that, I think I can say I can close up this webinar 15 minutes early. Look, have a fantastic rest of your Tuesday, and we shall see you on the next webinar part of the series, which will be held in around just before mid-October. And with that, I'll say bye for now. Thank you very much.